Hey guys, this is Mikey with Ava Prep Academy, and on this channel, we cover AP Biology, and on this channel, we cover SAT content. Alright, so if you're joining us from our series of videos on biology, welcome back. If you're new here, well that's awesome too. Because in this video, we're going to be moving on from our studies of AP subjects to other horrifying abominations created by the College Board overlords. This summer, in a series of videos, I hope to get you guys as ready as you can be for the English section of the SAT, including grammar, reading, and vocab, starting with some generalizable tips on, but not limited to, the grammar portion. By the way, if you're already familiar with how the grammar on the SAT works, then this video might just be the only thing that you need to watch. That being said, I'll be creating several separate videos for all of the concepts that I'll be discussing here today. So without further ado, let's lock in. So today's lesson will be on a strategic technique that you should always utilize when solving any standardized test, but especially so on the grammar portion of the SAT. As you may know, grammar questions span from about questions 15 through 21, and this is a section that you absolutely have to nail. Why? Because the other sections are just harder, so it's important to maximize your points on the grammar portion. So whenever you come across a section with the instructions that state something about conventions of the English language, always use my method, which is called the DES method. DES stands for detection, elimination, and selection. Let's explore each of these steps. First is detection. Detection is about recognizing exactly which grammar concept the question is testing you on. To be honest, grammar is a pretty huge subject on its own that could take years to master. Thankfully, on the SAT, there are only a handful of very specific topics that you have to know. So here, I urge you to recognize exactly which topic you're dealing with so that you don't A, waste your time thinking about topics that won't help you, and B, get the question wrong by looking at the wrong thing. So let's take a look at some examples. Here we're looking at a decent chunk of text, and before I read any of that, I always look at the answer choices. Specifically, I'm looking at the differences between the answer choices because this is what allows me to gain a sense of what this question is all about. Now on its face, this question appears to deal with verbs, so in my mind, I lock in on all the things I need to know about verbs for this test, which are verb tenses, verbs role in completing sentences, and finally subject-verb agreements. Now, the first thing that I see is that all of these four verbs in our choices can play a role in completing sentences, as none of them are infinitives or participles, so I'm left with tenses and subject-verb agreements. And just like that, I've narrowed down what I need to be thinking about to a pretty small set of topics and ideas. So now that we've completed the detection, let's move on to elimination. With elimination, we look for patterns within the answer choices to see if we can do a split or isolation. A split is essentially when we see patterns that separate the choices into two larger groups, while isolation is where we see only one answer choice being different from all of the other three. Now, going back to the question that we saw earlier, I can start to see a pattern emerging that may allow me to isolate one answer. Can you see it? It's D. Even without looking at the rest of the passage, I can already see that D is the only verb that would go with a singular subject. For instance, I can say they are, they have been, or they were, but with is, I have to say it is. This allows me to eliminate A, B, and C simultaneously, leading me to D being the only possible answer. But wait, there's still selection. Selection is about ensuring that the answer that you are left with is in fact grammatically sound. So before you select the answer choice and move on, you need to verify. And it is at this point that I can put my answer into context. Interestingly, the triangle representing the mountain itself is among the few defined figures in her paintings. Great, that makes sense because the triangle is among the few defined figures, as triangles is a figure and not the mountain. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I will be creating content to teach you exactly what College Board is doing here. But this is absolutely a subject-verb agreement question that we can solve through our technical prowess. Here are some more examples. And on this question, we see one of the most feared topics among students, the messy punctuation situation. But again, I will use my DES method. So the detection. Okay, so this appears to be a punctuation question that in a slightly broader context appears to be creating a list. And with list exists, I know that there's really only one thing that matters, which is parallelism. So given that, let's identify the pattern of our structure here, because with these questions, it's not so easy to eliminate just from the choices given. The Arctic Alpine Botanic Garden in Norway and the Jardim Botanico of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil are two of many botanical gardens around the world dedicated to A. Growing diverse plant species, both native and non-native. B. Fostering scientific research. And C. Educating the public about plant conservation. With that recognition of growing, fostering, and educating, I know that there has to be a splitter before fostering that looks like the splitter before educating. And that splitter seems to be a semicolon. Let's then look for a semicolon before fostering, which is, well, only B. And with that, we can select B, verify that both native and non-native is a phrase in reference to diverse plant species, and that we ought to split that segment from the next item on the list. And it looks like we're good to go. So last one. Let's begin with detection. We're looking at a question that pertains to apostrophes, and specifically we have people and stories as the two nouns to which these apostrophes could be potentially added. But you know, unless we're discussing groups of Aboriginal tribes, we wouldn't really use peoples as a plural, right? So almost immediately, I can eliminate B and C as part of that split method that I discussed earlier. Now that we're left with A and D, I ask myself whether story or stories would require an apostrophe. With this type of apostrophe that denotes possession, it appears that there's really nothing that the story possesses, so my initial selection is leaning towards A. So let's check and confirm. Literary agents estimate that more than half of all nonfiction books credited to a celebrity or other public figures are, in fact, written by ghostwriters, professional authors who are paid to write other people's stories, but whose names never appear on book covers. Well, that sounds pretty good to me, especially because in the context, other people would have not only one story, but many stories. And we could probably have done the split that way too. Look, this video is just a sneak preview of many more technical and conceptual ideas that we can use to our advantage in choosing the right answer every time in grammar. And in subsequent videos, I'm going to teach you about every single grammar concept that has ever come out on the SAT exam and ensure that you are well prepared to get a perfect score on the grammar portion. If you found this video helpful, consider clicking that thumbs up button and subscribing to our channel so that we'll see you in the next video. This has been Mikey with Avo Prep Academy. Have a good one.